Mr Speaker.
I call the Honourable Amy.
Oh, well, Mr Speaker, after that short break from reality, it's my great pleasure to take a call in this budget debate reflecting on Bill English's 8th budget, the 8th of the national-led government. And I think in a budget that tells anyone who's looking at the meat of the issue rather than the noise, that tells them that the New Zealand economy is strong, it is stable, jobs are growing, 170,000 so far, 200,000 so far, another 170,000 to come. Incomes are growing, and importantly, they're growing faster than inflation, so real incomes are growing, and on track to have an average income of $63,000 a year under the stewardship of this government. And, Mr Speaker, our GDP is growing. Now, that's not something to take lightly or to say quickly, because the reality is most of the countries that we would look to as comparable indicators of success would kill to have a GDP growth averaging 3% a year over the next few years. New Zealand is in a position that is envied around the world for its strong, stable economy, and that is thanks to Bill English, to John Key, and to the stability and success of this national-led government. We are now in a position where the moderate and rising surpluses that this government has delivered enables us to have choice. And actually that's what economic growth and surpluses and Obergall and all the phrases that Treasury sort of throw around and we discuss in this House, that's actually what it means. You get the country back into surplus because once you have surplus, we have options to do things that matter to New Zealanders. That's why in this budget, you're seeing us now being able to raise the budget for Farm Act, as my colleague Dr Coleman said in the opening contribution, the budget for Farm Act to $850 million a year, meaning we can fund more of the drugs for things like hepatitis C that affects 50,000 New Zealanders, melanoma drugs that are incredibly expensive but very, very successful, bowel screening across New Zealand, the biggest investment in school property spending in more than a decade. That's why, Mr Speaker, we work so hard on this side of the House to get us into surplus and create growth, because those surpluses are hard-won, hard fought for, but they represent the very real ability to provide that sort of quality of life for New Zealanders. And we haven't done it through borrowing. We haven't done the old Cullen Labor trick of just keep spending the money, let's run up the debts for our future generations to pay for. We've done it the way New Zealand families and New Zealand businesses do it, which is earn the money first, do the hard yards, work out how you can trim your sails, work out how you can be more efficient, work out how you can actually deliver more within a constrained amount and still deliver surpluses. So not only, sir, have we seen better education and more spending, better achievement and more spending in education, not only have we seen more elective surgeries every single year since we've been in office, not only have we seen a falling crime rate, safer on our streets, not only are we doing the work that my colleague Anne Tolley is leading to reform child, youth and family, as it desperately needs to do, but we're doing it while ensuring we get the books back into shape and we do not leave significant debts for my children and grandchildren in years to come to have to pay. Mr Speaker, those surpluses are starting to provide the very real choices and ability for this government to do those things, and we're very proud to be delivering them when countries around the world are facing increasing deficit forecasts. In fact, our debt track is going down. That is a remarkable achievement given the challenges that this government has faced, the international, the economic, the seismic, frankly, the weather-related challenges, to get a position where our debt track is reducing. Our core crown debt forecasts are going down, the surplus forecasts are going up. Mr Speaker, we're in a very strong position. I want to talk for a moment about the parts of the budget that relate specifically to my portfolios. And I have to start off, sir, with $837 million invested in this budget into the justice sector. That is one of the biggest investments we have seen into the justice sector, and it's on top of the extra $56 million that we put through supplementary estimates into the sector for this current year. What you're seeing in the budget, sir, is another $280 million for the police force. We're now funding 6,000 out-of-gate referrals. So when our prisoners are leaving prison, we're working extensively with them in the community in a collaborative wraparound way to ensure that we're doing everything we can to ensure that they can reintegrate well into society. And I want to talk about one specific stat that I think is incredibly significant, and that is this. We now fund 4,500 alcohol and drug treatment places in our prisons every year. 4,500. Do you know what that number was in 2008? 500. 500 places funded under the big spending Labor government. We are now funding 4,500 alcohol and drug treatment places every year, and I'm very, very proud of that. Mr. Speaker, the budget includes $8.2 million towards the setting up of the Sex Offenders Register to help keep our young children safe in society. And within that overall allocation, $208 million goes into the justice and court sector. Now, that is the biggest single investment we have seen in more than a decade. Of that $208 million, the biggest investment is focusing on access to justice. Mr. Speaker, you will be aware, this House will be aware of the challenge of ensuring that the communities and people within our communities have access to effective legal help when they need it. Mr. Speaker, we are putting $96 million into increasing legal aid, into increasing civil eligibility thresholds and criminal legal aid funding, into ensuring and enhancing the funding for community law centres, and into further funding for the Public Defender Service. And can I just touch on that for a minute? Because I was a huge fan of the Public Defence Service when Minister Simon Power created that, and it has been remarkably successful to the extent that the judges regularly now comment to me about the high quality of advocacy they see from our public defenders in court. It is a brilliant training ground for young lawyers. It is a very high quality legal service for those who need it, and Mr. Speaker, we're very pleased to be funding it further in this budget. Restorative justice gets a $16 million boost in this budget. And again, Mr. Speaker, this House should be aware that restorative justice has the potential to really revolutionise the way we think about, deal with and let victims recover from what is generally lower level offending. It does allow victims, they tell us this, to be heard, to feel that they get a sense of addressing their offender, that they get closure and that they can recover much better. And for the offenders, we are seeing a significant reduction in reoffending for those who have been through restorative justice. It does work. It is outside the norm. We want to see more of it, and that's why we've put more money into restorative justice. Mr. Speaker, we've funded an increase of non-violence programs for family violence offenders as part of our work, and you're going to see more from us in this space as the ministerial work group on family and sexual violence continues. But I did want to mention and highlight the $46 million, that with the help of Minister Antoli, we're putting into sexual violence services for victims. $46 million when the Select Committee did an inquiry into the funding of sexual violence services, and we want to commend them for their work. They noted that we needed to put more funding into the sector. We agreed, we said we would, and this budget, Mr. Speaker, delivers on it. The Independent Police Complaints Authority, an extra $300,000 every year to ensure that they can continue to operate and hold our criminal justice sector to account. Mr. Speaker, in the time remaining, I just want to talk very briefly about cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is a pervasive and real threat that we have to deal with. In fact, the global trade in cybercrime is now bigger than the international drugs trade. Cybercrime is bigger than the international drugs market. And Mr. Speaker, when you look at our $231 billion economy, we have to ensure New Zealand businesses are well positioned to take advantage of the digital world. We are uniquely positioned to do that with our world-leading infrastructure, our incredible, innovative, resourceful Kiwis, but we have to ensure that they learn how to keep themselves safe. And that's what cyber is about. It's why this government put out the first ever cybersecurity strategy in 2011, why we refreshed it last year, and why this budget includes $22 million, that'd be a good cybersecurity centre, $22 million to set up New Zealand's first CERT, which will be the one-stop shop, trusted clearinghouse for information, incident response and triage, analysis of threat information, and importantly, our international point of contact for cybersecurity incidents. And in addition, in that space, Mr. Speaker, can I finish by making reference to the money we've set aside in the budget for the Harmful Digital Communications Act and the agency we've set up. Last week I announced that NetSafe, with the approved agency under the legislation, they will do a fantastic job of enhancing education and awareness about being safe online, provide people with a very real, very cost-effective, quick form of redress, and Mr. Speaker, it is just another brilliant aspect of a budget of which I'm incredibly proud. Well done. Well done.